A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Radio 1 is also broadcasting live on its website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. On that website, there is an icon with the word Listen Live. You click on that icon and you'll be able to listen to us loud and clear. Now, Radio 1 is also live on the different radio listening apps, TuneIn, Afromobile, Your TV channel, Radio Garden, and Stream Afrique. You can also find us on DSTV, where our audio channel is 897. Today we'll be looking at the role of traditional or cultural institutions in the political and development agenda of our country. Now, today, the Kingdom of Uganda marks 31 years since it was restored, an act that opened the door for most of the original kingdoms, now referred to as legally as cultural institutions. Since then, almost all regions of Uganda has a cultural leader, save for Ankole, where the Ogabe has not been restored. Now, the NRM government says it was a strategic decision in line with the self-determination provision in the Constitution to have these institutions restored. They also say that the creation of new ones is also in line with this principle. All right, there have been some complaints about what some people call mushrooming cultural institutions, including what others say they are not worthy. To avoid these institutions landing in what was described as trouble, a law known as the Institution of Traditional Cultural Institutions Act was enacted, and among other provisions, it bars the institutions from engaging in partisan politics. Now, there is a popular demand to allow institutions to play wider roles in the political and development agenda of the country, given the love and trust they enjoy among its subjects. So the question is this possible given the current state of affairs in our country? Should the government listen to some of the proposals from these institutions, including devolution, what so many people refer to as federalism? So there are so many other discussions going on, but at the moment, the government says it enjoys cordial relations with all these cultural institutions, and through the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, the cultural leaders are being catered for, including being given a monthly stipend. To discuss this topic today, I have two guests. The Honourable Godfrey Kabyanga Baluku is the State Minister in charge of National Guidance. Honourable Kabyanga hails from the Kingdom of Singa Warenzururu. Thank you very much for joining us, Honourable, on this discussion.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. And good evening, listeners.
Now, we are going to be joined on the line by Mr. Ndebesa Mwambusha. He's a senior historian, the retired lecturer who taught at Makerere University. Let me begin with you, Honourable Minister. The restoration of cultural institutions, at the time it was done 31 years ago, there were objectives linking up to the reasons why they were abolished way back in 1966. From your assessment, are these objectives actually being met? Are these institutions relevant, looking at the current state of affairs in our country?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kenneth. It's very, very difficult to assess whether the cultural institutions have achieved the objectives since then, because what was restored was not what was there before. Because that one we have also to take note of. Before 1966, when they were abolished, these were kingdoms which had legislative powers. They had the executive powers. They were operating like a government. And these ones which were restored are cultural institutions without administrative powers, without legislative powers, without executive powers. Their main if you look at even the act, their main objective is to promote culture, first of all, and also to mobilize people for socio-economic transformation. So you cannot compare those kingdoms of that time of cultural institutions with those ones of now, it is really uncomparable.
All right.
But they are relevant, very relevant, even in the current dispensation.
All right. Yeah. You've argued on the line of what used to be and what is now. As somebody who belongs to a cultural institution, but somebody also understands what was and what is now, which one is better?
I think the situations change, dynamics change, the world changes, and therefore you can't even tell which was better and why. Because personally, I didn't live in those kingdoms because I was born slightly before they were abolished. So I can't tell you that I lived under them. But those ones who lived under them, they also had their own experience. And some of them have precious memories. Some of them have very, very harsh memories. Like in our case, it was not a good experience because we were suppressed. We were the underprivileged tribe in the kingdom. So for us, we can't tell you that they were good. But some who had privileged, who were the privileged tribes in those kingdoms, they enjoyed them.
You were then under which particular kingdom?
Toro Kingdom.
Exactly. Not Obusinga Warenzu.
No.
All right.
Yes, and Obusinga Warenzu is a revolutionary kingdom. You can't trace its.
Is it a kingdom or cultural institution?
It's a revolutionary cultural institution, kingdom, whatever you may call it. You can't trace its existence to a lot of history.
All right.
It is just a revolutionary kingdom which just broke off. And people said we are breaking off, and because of very, very minor issues, which right now can be negotiated. Be negotiated. But at that time, the arrogance of whoever was in charge of the kingdom made caused that break off. And obviously it was followed with a lot of harassment, a lot of suffering from the people. So for us, we cannot say we enjoyed the kingdom.
The kingdom.
We are better off in the current type of arrangement.
Right.
But to be sincere, this nation, Uganda, probably Professor Ndebesa, who is an expert in history, is going to even shed more light.
He will.
The history of Uganda, if you look at it, Uganda as a country is made up of different nationalities. And these were different kingdoms which came together to form a what? To form a republic. And therefore we cannot discard them just like that. We cannot discard them just like that, because even Obote's problems might have some origin on the issue of abolishing what? Kingdoms. Remember when he was overthrown in 1971, I think the happiest people were the kingdom loyalists, because the sins of abolishing kingdoms follows him even up to the grave. So I think what I can say is those who lived in kingdoms at that time, there were people who were happy with that arrangement, and there were those who are not happy with that arrangement. All
right, let's come to the present time. The reasons why these institutions were restored, you already stated that in the law, they are envisaged to be cultural institutions to play more role in cultural matters and also socio-economic transformation. Do you think these institutions have been given adequate space to actually do so? We continue to hear voices. People are saying, if that matter had been directed on by the king, the Kabaka of Buganda, or the king of the Omukama of Bunyoro, or the Omusinga, it would have been quickly undertaken by the masses, or it could have been received clearly by the masses. And there's a continuous call that give these institutions more role to play, as opposed to hindering them to play certain roles. What would be your take on that?
You know, now, when you look at the roles, according to the Act, is promote, preserve cultural values, norms, and practices. And then the second one is to promote the development, preservation, and the enrichment of all the people in the community. Now, all these sentiments which you hear, some of them are politically motivated. Even some of the people who don't believe in that try to bring it up as an issue just because of political sentiments. And obviously there are some people who benefit from that. But in real sense, we can never have that kingdom that was before, because we are now in a different situation, different dispensation, and it can never be. We are now
in a different dispensation.
In Uganda as a republic.
Agreed. But in the current sense, how do we make these institutions useful? Because the argument is they enjoy more trust, they enjoy more love than even the central government.
That's what I was coming to. These institutions enjoy more trust, and the cultural leaders are listened to. Why? Because probably we, the politicians, have not lived to the expectations of the people. We have not lived to our promises, and people think probably if we were still under the leadership of the kingdoms, things would be doing better. But also Ugandans love their culture, and they love their cultural norms. Recently, I was somewhere and I met a Nigerian, and his complaint was, every time you are with Ugandans, as soon as that Ugandan meets another Ugandan, they immediately switch to their local dialect. They stop talking English, and for you get lost completely. So that's how Ugandans are. They just love their culture, and they respect those cultural leaders. So what we need now as government is to partner with them, because they are listened to. They mobilize easily. Look at Uganda, for instance. The Kabaka, through the Prime Minister, decided to mobilize people to plant coffee. And if you look at Buganda now, the amount of coffee that has been planted, it is marvelous, very wonderful. Emwanyi terimba. That was the Kabaka's catchword. And people have planted coffee. Another example which I can give you, the Kabaka here went into mobilization of immunization against measles. Even those people who have misgivings about immunization, so long as the Kabaka had said, they all took their children for what? Immunization. He has been on the campaigns for HIV/AIDS. Even those who are still skeptical, at least listen that the Kabaka has won. And the Kabaka's word is sort of a law.
We also saw the response here with the COVID-19 vaccination.
COVID-19 vaccination.
And we have seen the Kabaka's runs.
Exactly, the Kabaka's runs. In Kasese, for instance, if Musinga says that they vote for you, they vote for you. If he says they don't vote for you, they will not vote for you. Because people listen to him.
All right.
They was like recently, during the census, they recently concluded census, when the executive director, Dr. Mukiza, went and visited him and appealed to him, he just sent a message. And it is the first time census was very successful in Kasese district.
In the Rwenzori
sub-region. So those are things which can show you that we can utilize these cultural institutions to mobilize people for socio-economic transformation.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll be coming back to you to ask you why sometimes when these cultural leaders actually speak, the central government does not want to listen to them on certain aspects. I'll be coming to you. Let's go to Mr. Mbebesa Mwambusha, senior historian and retired lecturer at Makerere University. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on the line.
Thank you, but your line is rather faint.
But we can hear you loud and clear, Mr. Mwambusha. Thank you very much for joining us. In studio, I am speaking to the Honorable Godfrey Kabyanga Baluku, the State Minister in charge of National Guidance. He hails from the Obusinga Rwenzururu, one of the cultural institutions that actually broke off from the original Toro Kingdom. And he has shared his perspectives about what used to be and what is now. And we would like to begin with you from there. These cultural institutions at the time they were being restored, what do you recollect? And do you think they are actually sticking to that, or there are certain things that we need to look into to make them more useful in the current political and development agenda of our country?
Thank you for bringing that important discussion, and good evening to you. Good evening, my colleague, Godfrey Kabyanga there. Yes, cultural institutions are neither here nor there. Are we really talking about cultural institutions or traditional institutions or what? I may not be splitting hairs here because we've got very many cultural-related institutions like the music associations, the literature association, the arts association. There are very many cultural institutions, but maybe what you are referring to in this particular case are the traditional cultural institutions promoting the identity of tribes in Uganda, or promoting the interests and the values of certain identity groups in Uganda, in terms of tribal groups in Uganda. Otherwise, there are very many cultural associations and institutions. But in this case, from the perspective you are talking, I think you are talking about the traditional cultural institution promoting the values and the interests and identity, especially of their respective tribal association, tribal communities. When you look at the history of these traditional institutions, yes, some of these traditional institutions were present during the colonial period or pre-colonial period. Others have just been created. Like the example you are giving of Honorable Kajanga there, I think of Rwenzururu and these others like Obudingia and many others have just been recreated or have been created. They were not there in the past. And certainly they are not devoid of contradictions and contestations. In fact, far from bringing about unity, to a certain extent they have brought disunity, because I don't think they are there is a community harmony in traditional areas, institutions, as opposed to those which do not have. As we talk now, there is a contestation over the leadership of the cultural institution or traditional institution in Acholi. There is contestation in Lango. There is contestation in Bujisu. Contestation, I think, among the Bagwere or something like that. Contestation in Buganda, even over the question of Banyara, Bamori, now the Koki people. Contestation in Ankore over the restoration or non-restoration of the Omogabe. Within Kasese itself, where Kabyanga, my friend, comes from, there is a contestation between the Bakonzo on one hand and the Basongora. Contestations are around. So, anyway, these traditional institutions are bound to lead to contestations because they sometimes become political. And this is not to say that they don't have a role they play. They have the role they play in promoting the identity of those communities, but we should not also overlook the other side of them, where they have raised a lot of contestations. I am not even very sure about the role they have played. In fact, I had my friend there talking about them promoting immunization. We are yet to find out whether the Bachinga who don't have those traditional institutions have lower levels of immunization than, say, Buganda and Busoga that do have, or Ankole that doesn't have. I am not even sure whether Emwani Kalimba, which is true that this may have contributed the growing of coffee, but I think there are other areas also which are growing coffee which do not have those traditional institutions. So the question of cultural roles, I don't know whether there are less marriage breakdowns, for example, in kingdom areas than in non-kingdom areas. But anyway, this is not to dismiss them completely, but to bring in another angle of discussing these traditional institutions, that whereas they might be bringing about some kind of community, traditional community promotion, they could, on the other hand, also lead to contestation around the leadership, which might actually end up dividing those communities. So when we are discussing this issue, we should not be taken up by emotions. We should look at it rationally and see that culture, yes, is necessary for the community to develop and be harmonious, but they can at the same time also bring disharmony. And let me put this one also, that culture is not static. Culture is dynamic. Culture grows. Culture adapts and adopts. And that is how we should look at culture. In a way, in conclusion, I would say that culture and traditional institutions are not irrelevant, but at the same time, they can also lead to certain problems in society, considering that Uganda is a republic. A republic means that the community, the society, in a republic, the public owns the state. The public owns the public, if you want. That is why it is called a republic. So we have got this kind of anomaly where you have a republic. I hope people understand what we mean by republic. And then under them there are monarchies, whereby the monarchies are hereditary, and yet we are living in a republic. And some of these ones which are newly created, like the one of Wenzuru, the one of Budingia, the one of the Japadora, the one of the Iteso, and many others, there might arise issues of hereditarism. Others might want these institutions to be elective or selective or appointive, depending based on abilities of the individual to lead those communities, not necessarily depending on hereditary. Because some others would question the hereditarism of these leaders, because when you reenact these institutions or create these institutions, most of them were created when Uganda in 1995, in the making of the 1995 Constitution, was very vocal about having their traditional leader restored. And then the others also followed suit. It was like a copycat syndrome. They wanted to be like Uganda, and the government allowed them, but it is still shrouded in myth. You can imagine that for a cultural institution to be recognized, to exist, it must be recognized by the central government. So, since when did culture become an issue of central government to recognize that before you are recognized, then you cannot form a traditional institution, And precisely that was the contestation that actually led to the crisis in Rwenzori, because there was this issue of recognition. So it is still shrouded in contestation, and I am glad that Radio 1 has brought out this issue so that we discuss it in public rather than pushing it under the carpet, and raise some of these controversies and contradictions and contestation, because they are always there. The king of Uganda cannot go to Nakasongola. The people of Koti are now jittery. They do not want the Mengo administration to go there. In Ankole, there is still the issue of the Mugabe restoration. In Lango, there is a contestation. In Acholi, I think most of us have heard how they have two leadership stories in Bugisu. It is back to you, Radio 1.
All right, thank you very much for that intervention there, Mr. Mwambusha. We are going for a break now. When we return, I'll put some of these issues to the minister here, who is in charge of national guidance, because some people actually think the contestations that Mr. Mwambusha is talking about is partly pushed by the central government to weaken the resolve of some of these original traditional cultural institutions. Now, stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at the role of traditional cultural institutions in the political and development agenda of Uganda. This is given the fact that 31 years ago, the government took a decision to restore kingdoms in this country, starting with the Uganda Kingdom, whose anniversary is being commemorated today, 31 years of the restoration of the Kingdom of Uganda. That was followed by restoration of other kingdoms and creation of new ones that are one of the guests who is on the line, Mr. Ndebesa Mwambusha, senior historian, saying that it has resulted into disharmony and contestations in the different parts of the country where they have been created. But there is also the unresolved issue of the restoration of the Kingdom of Ankole. At one time, we were told some royalists were actually pushing hard for its restoration, but they were told that is not impossible. According to the law, districts in the area where this kingdom is supposed to be have to pass resolutions supporting the restoration of the cultural institution, and then the government can take action and restore that institution. But what we know now, the palace of the Omugabe has actually been renovated, but we are told for only tourism purposes. Well, my other guest in studio is the Honorable Godfrey Kabyanga, Baluku, the State Minister in charge of national guidance. He hails from the Obusinga of Rwenzururu. And on the line, like already indicated, is Mr. Ndebesa Mwambusha, a senior historian. Now, Honorable Minister, senior historian raises a number of issues and even points to the fact that there is disharmony in some parts of this country because of some kingdoms which were created. And I think he even points out one is Obusinga wa Rwenzururu, but also Obudingia, which is also a breakaway from the Obusinga wa Rwenzururu. We have also had things to do with the kingdom of Buganda here. And like he said, the Kabaka cannot go in some places because it is actually alleged that government has propped up some people to become heads of cultural institutions in those areas because of the so-called self-determination principle, and they are also causing disharmony. What would be your response on those issues?
First of all, contestations will always be there in any institution and any society, organized society, because even the pre-colonial, you should first of all know that the original kingdom was the Bunyoro Kitara, which was I think started from it covered the whole of Western Uganda, I think up to Karagwe. But all other kingdoms were just a breakaway from Bunyoro Kitara, including this Uganda, including Toro. All were breakaway. Why? Because of contestations. So contestations have been there before, and they will continue to be there. And they are not, contestations are not limited to only cultural institutions. Even republics like Uganda, even now there are contestations in Uganda where some people think the current ruling government is not there according to in a fair and free
put it in
way.
The current context. It's too corrupt, they say.
Yeah, all those are contestations. So contestations will always be there, and I agree with the Professor Ndebesa that contestations were there and contestations are still there. But that one doesn't discard the fact that we can use them for socio-economic transformation. Because there isn't any time that we shall have no contestation.
All right.
I have told you that Rwenzururu was a breakaway from Toro Kingdom, and it's now there, and we have contestations. But let me also put it very clear. I think now the contestations which are there now, people have not really grasped the type of traditional cultural institutions that are prescribed in the Constitution, because they are not supposed to have boundaries. A boundaries for what? They are supposed to be institutions which promote culture and just identity, just as Professor Ndebesa said. But you can't have boundaries. You don't have legislative powers. You don't have administrative powers.
Reality? Is it
no,
the reality?
But that's what it is supposed to be.
Let me give you an example. When you have a cultural institution that has its budget, has its titular heads in the different parts of its demarcation, like you said there, we know where, for instance, Obsingawa Renzururu, we know the boundary of Obsingawa Renzururu, we know Buganda, we know Bunyoro, and they seem to be working like they used to do. The only thing that they lack is the political power that some people actually think should be given to them. Now,
those are the problems, because when you look at
saying it's time to go for a federal arrangement.
Yes.
Even if you look at the commission, which was which collected views from the different parts of this country, people were in favor of a federal system of government.
That is the problem, because federal has not yet been institutionalized, and when you look at the current act, there is no need of even talking about boundaries. It's actually, I think I would talk about the Aga Khan. You have seen the Aga Khan, the Simelia community. Their titular head is what? The Aga Khan. When he comes here, he will meet those Indians of his, and they pay allegiance to him. So now I have had a problem, for instance, in Kasese, because now they were Songora. We don't share culture with them, not at all. We circumcise, they don't. They are cattle keepers. We are what? We are traditional cultivators. So you cannot say that they should promote our culture, because we have different cultures, and if they come up with some head and they called him a cultural leader, me, I don't have any issue with them, because that's their culture and that's their cultural leader. Me, I will pay allegiance to my Omusinga, and the Musongora, if he wants, he can also pay allegiance to Omusinga. But if he doesn't want, he can pay allegiance to his own cultural leader. So those are the issues which are bringing contestations, because we have not really grasped what the current constitution, the current description of what that cultural traditional institution is.
All right. Yes. Let's go back to Mr. Ndebesa on the line. Mr. Ndebesa, there are some demands that these cultural traditional institutions continue to make. For instance, there are those who are insisting that they need to have some power shared from the center back to them for purposes of deciding on their development agenda, financing that development agenda, and that famous discussion around the federal system of government. What will be your take on that as one of the unresolved demands that continue to follow us up to today?
Thank you for that question, but let me make just a side comment on the federal issue you are raising. We have got a federal system in Ethiopia. We have a federal system in Nigeria, and we have a federal system in South Africa. Are those countries harmonious? The last time I checked, there is a war over those identities in Ethiopia. The same thing is in Nigeria. South Africa, the recent elections, you saw one group, the Zulu, who actually are hankering for this kind of arrangement, voting alone. So I don't think that the federal system of arrangement is necessarily the solution to Uganda's problems, because many people have put it forward like you have put it forward, but I don't think it has been a solution to Africa's problems. As long as we have not formed a nation state, we shall have these contestations and challenges. Where in Uganda now, traditional institutions have got even a national anthem. So how does a tribal group have a national anthem? How national is that one? And when they are being sung, those tribal national anthems, you find the population is more excited than when the national anthem of Uganda is being sung. So this is a national question now, a national question that we need to address. I am glad we have the Minister of National Guidance. I hope he should, I wish he could come up with a way of how we can have a national dialogue about the nationhood in Uganda. Because how far shall we go? Because we have got different identities in Uganda. And these traditional cultural institutions are the nucleus around which these identities are strengthened. So on one hand, we have got a nationality or tribal or ethnic identity strengthened through mobilization around cultural institutions. On the other hand, we need to build a national identity. Now, there will be contradictions not only within the communities as indeed it is, but there is bound to be contradiction between these tribal identities and the national identity. And it has happened in the history of Uganda. If you want, I can give you some little bit of history. That the crisis, some of the crises we have had in Uganda are around those issues. In fact, some people think that the first crisis in Uganda, a serious one, was in Uganda. Far from that, it was actually in Bunyangavu, between the Bakonzo and Batoro in 1963. I am told almost a state of emergency was declared in that region. 66, we had the crisis between the central government and one of the ethnic identities of Buganda. And we have continued to have these issues arising between the center and some subnational identities like the one between the central government and Rwenzururu. And at the other time, the Kayum incident was also a crisis between Buganda and Banyara, and then the central government came in. So the Minister of National Guidance should take up this matter, because it is not a simple matter. We are trying to build a nation state because we are not yet a fully functioning nation state, and discuss these things openly. How in a republic you can have monarchies, and at the same time within these monarchies or these tribal identities, you have got contestations. There is, on the one hand, contestation within the same community, as is happening, say, in Bugisu, in Buganda, in Busoga, in Ankore, in Rwenzori, in Nacholi, in Rangwade, and elsewhere. But there is also that element of contestation between these subnational institutions and the central government. What I am bringing about here is that we need to manage. There is a need to manage this subnationalism that is underneath, where you have national anthems of tribes, and where some of the identities spill over into politics, and people normally would want to take things to their own subnational identities. You had national leaders somewhere in, was it the Antondo or whatever, the speaker and an MP saying, you can see things from the center, provided you bring to your subnational groups. Therefore, if I was to advise the Minister of National Guidance and we guide this nation, we should have a formula or find ways and means of managing subnationalism and not wishing it away. Subnationalism is there. That is why people talk about Gambanogu. That is around subnationalism.
All right, thank you very much.
We cannot say that we cannot blame it in one group or the other. We should realize that these subnationalism are still rife, because we are still a people who are still building a nation state. And a nation state needs to be built around discussions in public about such issues and should not be swept under the carpet. I do not know, I am not sure that for the 31 years we have had these sub-national identities and leaders that we have united our communities better than we used to be. But finally, I would want to comment on these sub-national identities and their leadership. They need to form a strong association like they have done in Zambia, and they should not just participate in politics by way of supporting one group or the other, but they should be strong enough to hold the central government accountable. I think they have got the potential to bring about democracy in this country by holding the central government accountable.
Thank you.
But they can only do that if they themselves agree amongst themselves.
All right,
because if the traditional leader of Nakasongora, of the Baruri, cannot see eye to eye with that of Mengo, if the traditional leader of Rwenzori cannot see eye to eye with that one of the Bamba, if the traditional leaders of one group of the Bamasaba cannot sit down with another group of Bamasaba, if the Acholi group now has two groups and they are concentrating on their intra-clan, intra-tribal conflict, then they will not bring about accountability for the central government. Otherwise, they have got the potential of bringing about accountability to the central government because they have got social power, they have got cultural power, which potentially can be harnessed and utilized for democracy in Uganda. But if they are concentrating on fighting for their own big titles within the national and sub-national groups, they will not actually achieve much because the central government may take advantage of those divisions within themselves to have political capital for itself.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ndebesa, there for your elaborate discussion of the issue there. Let's now come to the minister here in the studio. He raises a number of issues, contestations between even central government and some of these cultural institutions. And that reminds me of that tug of war that was between the Obusinga Barenzruru, where you hail from, and the central government. And maybe I should not even mention what happened there. You remember very well what happened, and the listeners do remember. And he suggests that maybe we should have a national dialogue on these issues.
First of all, the issue of a national dialogue, I support him 100%. Because I strongly believe people don't understand what really the Constitution talks about. They still think about those kingdoms which had legislative powers, which had the armies.
Maybe that's what the people want.
No. But
these institutions are about the people.
And that is the
They're
problem.
Not about the leader.
That is the problem now. Those ones can't happen.
So how do we deal with
that? There
were
so many contestations at that time, and we can't bring back some of those.
Well,
but look here.
The principles of legislation, Honorable Minister, once people do not embrace the law, then that law is in itself not useful to the people.
And unfortunately, those ones who don't embrace the law are the cultural leaders themselves, because they want to still have that power. But if you look at the citizens themselves, I don't think...
It's actually the loyalists who are demanding more.
But they are conservative loyalists, but they are also loyalists like us who are Republicans. We respect our kings, we respect our cultural leaders, but we are still Republicans. But let me also clarify on one thing.
Right.
The issue of what my elder Ndebesa was bringing about, the anthems. These are not national anthems. These are kingdom anthems. Just as schools have anthems, just as women have anthems, nurses have anthems.
But it raises a very important issue. When these anthems are being sung, they are given more respect than the national anthem.
Because they talk to the aspirations of the people. They talk to the aspirations of the what? Of the people. But that loving them doesn't make them national. I think that one we should also be clear about. Loving those anthems doesn't make them what? National. They remain tribal anthems, kingdom anthems. That's it. We should leave it at that. But national dialogue is very, very important.
They speak loud at what is more closer to the people.
Oh, yes, because what they talk about is the people themselves. If you listen to Uganda, ekitibwa kya Buganda kyava Chavada. It is really talking about Buganda and its aspirations. If you listen to the Obusinga anthem, Rwenzuru wetu.
Kirumira Mutima.
No, not Kirumira Mutima. That one is a wrong thing. But when someone talks about Rwenzuru wetu, it's talking about our Rwenzuru. And it talks to that identity. But what Professor Ndebesa is saying about national dialogue is very, very important. So that we really make a clear demarcation. Are we still in those kingdoms of pre-independence time? Or we are now in those cultural, traditional institutions? And then people understand exactly where we are. We are going to solve some of these contradictions. And as he has said, federal does not mean tribal, because there are so many federal states in this world that are not federating along tribal lines.
But at least we remember the original regions that came together to form the Republic of Uganda. When you go to the gate of Parliament, those regions are there with their emblems.
Yes.
Yeah. Suggesting some level of control and organization.
Yes, but now those original regions may not be the ones now which form the whole of Uganda. Because look here, even when you look at the 1962 Constitution, even the presidency would rotate, but would rotate among who? Uganda, Busoga, Toro, Bunyoro, I think, and Ankole, I don't remember well.
Well, we had not reached to all the other institutions.
Now, the others were not measured anyway. So you cannot now say that's what should come up. So when you are talking about federal states and you are talking about those blocks, they can't work now.
All right, we have comments coming in from the listeners. Ben Onfred Twinamasko writes in and said, restoration of cultural institutions would have been fully believed if the Ogabe of Ankole was equally allowed to operate. Now here we have a loyalist from Ankole.
Yes.
Otherwise, it will take the kingdom subjects of the restored kingdoms to make their institutions outstanding. That's a comment from Ben Onfred Twinamasko there, making a case for the restoration of Ankole Kingdom. Then we hear from Chris Kasaija. Happy to hear from Mr. Presentism, Professor Ndebesa. I always enjoy to drink from his rich fountain of wisdom. Our Uganda national anthem still carries very important messages, except the actions of our Ugandan politicians vulgarize it. That's a comment from Chris Kasaija there. Then we have another comment from Ejo Ijob, who says, to some extent, they have achieved, but some of these kingdoms have suffered in the hands of the government. For example, Rwenzuru Kingdom and Buganda Kingdom. And he says some of their leaders were actually detained by the regime. Well, those are some of the comments that we are getting from the listeners. There are more coming in, but time may not allow us. Then we have another comment. Justine writes and says, Kenneth, it's true that the anthems are not national anthems, but traditional anthems for those specific traditions. They are sung mainly during traditional functions taking place in those communities, and there is no harm to other people from different communities. That's Justine listening in from SETA. Very quickly, Mr. Ndebesa, on the comment from Benon Fred Twinamasko on the issue of Ankole Kingdom, would you like to see that kingdom restored? Very quickly, in a few seconds, we are coming to the end of this discussion.
The comment there for me will be biased because I'm a Republican. And not only a Republican, I'm a cultural leader. Actually, I'm the chairman of Banyankole Cultural Foundation, which is against the restoration of the kingdom. So, on that one, I would like to have a debate with the Masiko, both of us in your studio. Otherwise, it has got merits and demerits which we cannot discuss and complete here. But I wanted to make a final comment on the minister's statement to the effect that the 1960s arrangement was considering only the kingdom areas. No. In 1964, I think, there was an amendment in the 1962 Constitution to provide that the president of Uganda would be elected among the traditional leaders of Uganda. And in that year, in 1963, all communities in Uganda, I think about 14, they created their own traditional leaders, and they put horns on them and feathers and whatever. So that is the time when the whole of Uganda was monarchized.
All right. Very quickly, Honourable Minister, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
I think I would like, first of all, to thank you for bringing up this topic, and I think you should bring it to one of these Fridays when we have enough time, because it's a very, very important topic, so that we can dissect it very well. But let me say that those traditional culture institutions can still be used, irrespective of all these contradictions that exist, because they are still being listened to and the cultural leaders are still well respected. Let us just get positive energy from them and utilize them for socio-economic transformation. Irrespective of those contestations, still we can mobilize. And I still believe the Kabako of Uganda's mobilization of Mwani Terimba is working. Yes, there is Mwani being grown in Kasese, but it also has a different, under different dynamics. But in Uganda here, the Kabako has played a big role.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndebesa Mwambusha, historian and retired lecturer at Makerere University. Thank you very much for joining us on the line. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Godfrey Kabyanga, the State Minister in charge of National Guidance. Thank you very much, dear listener, for actually listening in and tuning in. We'll have been your host, Kenneth Lukwago Anderson. Up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train. Now, from me and the guests, it's a good night.